One name I forgot to mention earlier, by the way, if Oregon were to be able to flip Chris Henry in 2026, remember that Gatlin Bear returns from his mission in 2026. That receiver room is loaded with talent now and in the future, and I'm all about it. So, this question came from a Locked On Ducks insider who gets priority access, who says, "Hey Spencer, I hope you're having a good day. Other than Decory and Moore, Sali Apaga and Offord, who I think both will find significant snaps this upcoming season. Remember, Sali Apaga is coming off of an injury, so he's got to recover and get healthy. But if he does, I agree. Who out of the 24 and 25 signing classes do you believe get significant snaps or potentially starts? I think Breland, Lopa, and Mathuti from the 24 class. I think Finney and McNutt find rotational snaps. I think we may see more rotation with DBs this season to keep guys fresh for the length of the season. So I want to extend this question back to 23 a little bit. 25 is really hard to predict because the number of true freshmen that tend to play are few and far between. I have a hard time seeing Decory and Moore as not being one of them. Now, positionally, you're right to say Trey McNutt because he's a safety, or Naeem Offord, who I talked about on yesterday's show, as capable of moving over and playing safety. Either one of those guys, yep, could absolutely see it. Maybe Brandon Finney is that good to play on the outside, but you have to remember, these guys are coming into their first year of college ball, and Oregon has recruited top 10 classes for 2 cycles now, most of whom are still on the roster, and those guys have now spent 1 or 2 years in a weight room, in a nutrition plan, at practice, watching film with the coaches. That's a significant advantage, assuming that they are healthy. So from the 24 class, I think Aydin Breland's a guy that figures to have a role for a couple of reasons. Number one, really talented guy who we saw getting snaps in the Rose Bowl after Amarion Winston transferred out, just kind of those spot snaps here and there on the interior. And he's a more typical interior defensive lineman anyway than Amarion Winston was, but he was also behind him on the depth chart this season, or at least that's how it appeared and such. But Breland is a guy that going into his second year, I think is primed to be that Amari Washington guy who plays a role but is not a starter necessarily, but you really start to see the full potential. Because Washington, remember, just played a little, played some, and Washington didn't show what he was this year a season ago. He got into the weight room, he worked on himself in the offseason as a player, and he was awesome this year, and I think he's one of Oregon's starting defensive tackles this season. I think Breland can be on that same sort of trajectory because of the position group. I would also look at a guy like Terrence Green, who is from the 23 class, and say the opportunity is there. Now, maybe that becomes a Jericho Johnson or a Tioni Grays, a Davian Sims, one of those guys on the interior. But I think that's one of the position groups battles, the second 2 defensive tackles on the interior of the defensive line. That's one of the position groups that I'm going to be watching for when spring ball rolls around. That makes me wonder which guy's stepping up, who's claiming this role, because it kind of looks wide open. So Breland's a guy. Kingston Lopa, though, I don't know. Answer. Honestly, I don't know, because we saw him just suddenly emerge in the Big Ten championship game because Oregon was struggling to cover Tyler Warren. Now, Lopa is a guy who is really tall. He's 6'3", 6'4", in that sort of range. And the 2 safeties that Oregon had been trying to cover Tyler Warren with in the first half, Kobe Savage and Tysheem Johnson, I don't know. They're listed at different heights elsewhere. Neither one is really 6 feet tall. They're like 5'11" or so, 5'10", 5'11". Lopa brings some real length out there. I thought he did a really nice job. I don't know if that was just a specialty role that was concocted for him going into that game because of how involved Tyler Warren is and how important he was to that Penn State offense. Because as we saw throughout the postseason as well with Penn State, they couldn't throw the ball to wide receivers. So that was a specific matchup that they had clearly gotten Lopa ready for, and I thought he did a nice job. But that's all he was doing out there. Now, that's more confidence than a lot of true freshmen get, because that's a pretty significant spot to be given a true freshman reps against the best tight end in all of college football. However, it was a specialty sequence, and I don't know if that's indicative of the fact that he's ready to suddenly take on, a starting safety role. Maybe it does. The physical traits are there. You see the potential, but is everything ready? Can he tackle the way that you need to at the safety position? Because I saw him in coverage briefly in that game, thought he looked good. Wasn't a world beater per se, had a pass interference that he, mistimed his break on the ball, and he didn't really even need to. He could have just made the tackle there. Maybe he's still got it another year of development before he becomes a significant player. But I think that's certainly an option. I see why your mind is there. I just wouldn't Sharpie that into your head as, oh, he's got to because he played in that spot. That was kind of a unique circumstance there. Another guy that I'd look at, and this is from 2 cycles ago, but Janoris Wilson is, I think, going to push to be one of Oregon's starting offensive tackles, and he's probably first guy off the bench at that spot. Like, he had a more significant role, I think, than most people realize this past year, because he was Oregon's jumbo offensive lineman, just like Josh Connerly was as a true freshman. Janoris was a redshirt freshman this past season, but that's somebody who, blue chip recruit, doesn't play a lot early, suddenly finds a role. Maybe he takes that jump, or maybe it's Alex Harkey and Isaiah World, the transfers. But if either one of those guys go down, I would imagine that Janoris Wilson is the first guy off the bench. But maybe he just beats one of them out in spring ball. I think Harkey would be the more likely of the two to get beat out because World is a big-time NFL caliber prospect. But at the same time, it's not as if Janoris Wilson's lacking the physical traits, talent, or experience to take that next step forward in there. So that's another name that I would certainly watch. The secondary on a whole, quite frankly, is such a crapshoot. Because, yeah, you bring in the best defensive back recruiting class Oregon's ever had. Trey McNutt, Naeem Offord, and Brandon Finney. Like, other big-time programs were making pushes for these guys, and Oregon kept them, and that was really, really great to see. But it's not as if they've been completely void of recruiting high-end corners and safeties in the last couple cycles. I mean, Aaron Flowers was garnering all sorts of All-American honors when he came out of high school last year. Is he going to have a role this year? Peyton Woodyard was a blue-chip recruit that was recruited by Nick Saban at Alabama, and then he left once Saban left. I mean, is that a guy that slides in and is one of your starting safeties? I don't know. That's a guessing game in there. What's not as big of a guessing game is linebacker. So this is a 4-man guessing game, whereas the DBs are like an 8 to 10-man guessing game on which guys are going to be significant players. But there is no question that at least one of Dylan Williams, Kamar Mathuti, Braden Platt, or Jerry Mixon, who are from the 24 class, the first 3 guys are, and then Mixon's from 23, there is no question one of them has to play a significant role. Betcher coming back is huge. Devin Jackson still being there is great. But you lost Jeff Bossa, who was the second best linebacker Oregon had this year and has been a starting backer for the last 3 seasons. That's a lot of snaps to replace. Believe he played more snaps than anybody else at linebacker this year. Betcher led the team in tackles, but those were the 2 guys. So now you've lost one of those guys. Jackson probably steps up. That's great. Who fills the Devin Jackson role? That could be a battle. Who fills the Justin Jacobs role as the 4th linebacker? That could be a battle. So on the interior of the defensive line and at inside linebacker, I am 100% confident that you will see guys on the field in 2025 playing a significant role in some form or fashion who were not playing really any kind of role this year or the past year. That is about all I'm certain of right now.